Point out that we don't know when that address was taped. We will, of course, attempt to bring it to you live or as soon as possible. We also plan to broadcast our own video shot by CNN crews that weathered the artillery, the storm last night in Baghdad. We will bring that to you live, unedited, as soon as it is fed into CNN's headquarters here in Atlanta. Meantime, in the United States, members of Congress were quick to react to the beginning of war against Iraq. Most expressed hope that the conflict ends quickly with a minimum number of casualties. Some lawmakers also praise what they consider the apparent U.S. upper hand in the assault.
The difference between or it was another gentleman, the difference between the UN and allied forces and the Iraqi is that the field commanders have appropriate ability to give appropriate orders in our particular procedures, and the Iraqis take their order from a single point, and they apparently blew out the command and control centers at each location. That, I would think, is what must have occurred, because they did not seem to respond, at least the Iraqi air arm did not seem to respond, which I would think would possibly mean that many of them were taken out on the ground.
Even if the Air Forces don't do it entirely themselves, they may do 90% of it or 80% of it, in which case the
U.S. will have a relatively easy opportunity now to assess the entire damage that was inflicted by this initial U.S. airstrike. But we are told that the airstrikes have stopped for the time being. The crews have returned. We have no reports yet, and I want to stress yet, we have no reports yet of any U.S. casualties or any of the U.S. Planes that may have been lost or are missing so far. That seems to be pretty much okay as far as the Pentagon is concerned. Here come some more military vehicles over at this air base in Saudi Arabia, awaiting the return of some of the U.S. fighters that went into this pinpoint airstrike to actually assess the military situation, to see exactly what the damage is as far as the Iraqis are concerned, and potentially what the U.S. and allied forces, any damage that they may have sustained. But there's also, I'm told, a political message. There is a desire to see if Saddam Hussein, after this initial setback, clearly there has been a military setback to the Iraqi leadership, if after this initial setback, Saddam Hussein is prepared to announce that Iraq will withdraw its hundreds of thousands of troops from Kuwait. I am told that if the Iraqi leader, even at this late moment, were to make that kind of announcement, were to come forward and say, okay, that's it, the Iraqi forces are leaving Kuwait, the government of exile of Kuwait can be restored, the U.S. would presumably, and this is a strong word, presumably, not go back to those airstrikes. Largely, the U.S. believes that I
mentioned before, the Council has broken up now. The Council's not expected to do anything, really. After all, it was the Council that authorized this action. It was the Council that authorized member states to use all necessary means if Iraq did not withdraw by the 15th. And it probably comes as no surprise, but there has been no sign of the Iraqi ambassador here at the United Nations. I'm Jeannie Mose reporting live from the UN.
Jeannie Mose.
Thank you, Jeannie. Wouldn't the U.S. use its veto power?
Early this evening, in fact, right at 7 o'clock our time when the bombing was due to begin, he was watching television. He was watching the reports coming from Baghdad, remarked that things were moving right on schedule. But what we don't know is precisely how long this timetable is. The president has always said it would be swift and decisive, but we also heard Secretary Cheney say that this is really just the beginning, that this could take some time. It depends on if, for that matter, if Saddam Hussein has gotten the message and is prepared to change his approach to this. But every indication is that this could go on for days, and we have really only dealt with the air war at this point. We don't know whether there's going to be a ground war. That has not started. The president has committed heavy aerial assets, presumably in the hope that that might be enough. But you're absolutely right. No one is claiming victory. They're claiming satisfaction.
Okay, Charles Bierbauer, thank you very much. Reporting live from the White House. Of course, he and his colleagues will keep us updated from there. Susan?
And CNN's colleagues in Jerusalem are standing by to keep us up to date from that angle. CNN's Linda Schertzer is here. Linda, what's the latest there?
Well, it's been a very good morning for Israel. Those were the words of Defense Minister Moshe Aarons, who appeared on Israeli television just about 40 minutes ago. It's now a little after 8 o'clock in Israel. The Israelis are waking up. They are now glued to their TV sets and radios and learning about an operation with a great sense of relief, an operation that happened while most people were fast asleep. The streets were virtually empty in the early hours of the morning in Israel as Operation Desert Storm got underway. Shortly after the news was reported here, the Army ordered all Israelis to stay inside their homes, to open up their boxes containing their gas masks, and to be prepared to use them. Sometime after the air attack started, a senior Army officer reported that some of the bases and missile launch sites that posed the greatest threat to Israel had been dealt a serious blow by Allied bombers. The news brought a great sense of relief to the Israelis, who had been preparing for the possibility of a chemical attack to follow the breakout of war. But defense officials and other Israeli leaders are saying that the danger has not completely passed. And
for these things, because he don't obey all the international opinion. He don't follow the laws of the people. He don't want peace. He's not looking for peace. That's why they started the war against him.
Well, one of the things you were telling me earlier, your reaction when you first heard that the bombs were falling, what did you do?
Well, I was crying and happy in the same time. I can't express my feeling to you because I was.
You, of course, are looking at unedited U.S. pool tape. It was apparently shot yesterday as U.S. forces were getting ready for the overnight assault on Baghdad and reportedly also Kuwait. They are loading the bombs on the F-15 Eagle, part of the U.S. Air Force. It has a dual role as a fighter and an attack aircraft. CNN's Wolf Blitzer is joining us from the Pentagon as we continue to look at the pictures of the unedited U.S. pool tape.
Well, these F-15 Eagles are really the best U.S. air superiority fighter aircraft, and they obviously played a very important role in this initial U.S.-led airstrike. We're seeing some of these bombs and missiles that were attached to the F-15 before the airstrikes. Clearly, the fighter aircraft returned to these air bases in Saudi Arabia without their bombs, without their missiles. Most of these missiles are really what they call smart munitions, very sophisticated laser-guided, television-guided missiles that don't only fall.
States, 3 Hawks from Kuwait and 4 Tornadoes from the Great Britain, from the British Air Force, taking off from his vantage point, and that perhaps there was going to be some additional bombing taking place. Any word at all from the Pentagon?
No, Patrick. The word here at the Pentagon is that after this massive initial U.S. strike, the Pentagon and the other allies decided to pause. It shouldn't be all that surprising, though, that there have been some other planes taking off, even if it doesn't portend yet another round of airstrikes, because they want to make sure that the targets that were supposedly destroyed were in fact destroyed. So I wouldn't necessarily conclude from these initial reports from our colleague Charles Jaco in Saudi Arabia that this means that the United States and the Allies are yet again starting a second round.
There's been a lull. Well, I just heard another bomb blast, but I'm sure a bomb blast at a distance very far from our hotel. I would say maybe 5 or 10 miles. It sounds like the firing of 26-inch guns from a battleship, actually, when you're, maybe 20 or 30 miles away from the battleship. It's just a very loud explosions, but at a very great distance away. And I'll try to describe, now that we have some daylight, I can at least give you a better picture of the street scenes here. There are still cars going up and down on this street, but many cars are traveling in reverse. It's like you're watching a motion picture played backwards. Cars are doing anything they can to scramble to get off the street. I see a public school bus now that's making a turn to get off of this main street in downtown Baghdad. From the sounds of it, what battle is going on some far distance away from where we are.
John, let me just ask you in terms
It's pretty calm right now. What I'll do is, Susan, see if you have any other questions for me or the rest of our CNN team members. It's Mark Biello, our cameraman, has just walked in the room. Mark, can you see anything from either side of the hotel?
No, on the east side of the building,
There was some sporadic anti-aircraft fired, but nothing as of now. It just seemed like some sporadic shooting and maybe only one or two fighters. It may not even have been a full attack.
Yeah, right. So Charles Jaco, of course, saw some planes taking off about 30 or 40 minutes ago from his position in Saudi Arabia, and that perked up our ears and made us a little bit more interested in listening out the windows here. It appears it's quiet again, Susan. Let me come over so that I can hear what you have to say. Go ahead.
John, apparently my colleague Patrick Greenlaw has a question for you. Patrick, go ahead.
John, I guess you just answered the question then. In terms of intensity, even though you can't see because of the fog, in terms of intensity, this was nothing like what you went through last night then at the beginning stages.
I think it's probably exactly like the beginning stages of what we saw last night. I was catching the only hour's sleep I had in the past 2.5 days. At the beginning stages of this, Bernie Shaw was in here. He was about to interview, I believe, former Secretary of State George Shultz when all hell began to break loose here in Baghdad. Right now, it's calm again. I don't know what to say to you except to say that it's interesting to still see people on the street. In fact, I saw a couple of people in Arabic headdresses walking down the sidewalk. I can still see them. They're not even running. They're just walking slowly down the sidewalk to some location. My colleague Bernie Shaw, a man who was trying to get a little sleep, has just come running in the door.
I'll tell you, I'm afraid to go to sleep because, one, as a journalist, I don't want to miss anything, and two, I don't like trying to go to sleep where bombs are falling.
No kidding.
A couple bombs, obviously, were just dropped way off in the distance. And as I ran down the hall, John, I'll tell you what I think this is. I think this is an effort to test, to see what is still viable, what has survived, which batteries have survived. You'll notice that it came very quickly, and it ended very quickly.
And there's not a lot of anti-aircraft fire. There wasn't a lot of anti-aircraft fire during this raid. I'll tell you this, Bernie, while you were away, Charles Jaco in Saudi Arabia detected a group of F-15, I believe Charles said they were F-15s, taking off from his position. He could see them take off. Didn't know where they were going. It is possible that those planes which left about 40 minutes ago might be the very planes creating this increased level of tension in our broadcast booth.
I would surmise that those planes that took off, if they indeed were headed this way, they certainly have arrived at the destination. I'm sure you've reported on this, but isn't this eerie? I keep using that word, but that is a word that really goes to the heart of some of the impressions we're getting from here in Baghdad. To see traffic moving along, and I watched for the cars to pull off. They did not pull off to the side of the road. When that wave went by, the wave of bombing went by, these cars, some of them sped up and they tried to get away.
I saw a couple of taxi cabs in reverse going about 30 miles an hour right down in front of us.
Did you see that one cab here that backed up?
No,
he backed up and he backed up on the curb and was frantically turning around to get out of the way. But I just ran down the hall and I wanted to make sure we were all right and you're okay, and I'm going to walk back down the hall. And
lie down, Bernie. You're going to have to be standing here while I'm lying down in 4 or 6 hours. So you won't be able to sleep, but at least
my problem is I can't turn off my mind, but I'm going to try. I'm going to try to find a key.
Good luck, Bernie Shaw. Susan Patrick, we're still here. Other questions for us?
Thank you, Bernie. John, have you heard anything from Iraqi officials? The last word you had, apparently officially, was word that Saddam Hussein was planning to go on Iraqi television. I assume that is apparently canceled. But have Iraqi officials told you anything?
Well, we've heard a little bit from Iraqi officials, Susan. The phones which we thought were working here are not working. They rang once, each of them. You might get a dial tone, Bernie, but try to dial for an outside line to see if you get one. That's the problem we have.
Mark Biello, our chief cameraman here, he's our only cameraman here. He's the man who stayed up all during the night to get the pictures. We hope that we can get out of this country. We're trying, ladies and gentlemen around the world, we are trying desperately to get these pictures out. But right now, Mark is using gaffer's tape on the windows here, and I'm going to see if I can find a roll to use on my windows in my room.
Yeah, good idea, Bernie. But at any rate, I'll tell you what we know from Iraqi officials. They told CNN they came to visit us after Iraq about a half a mile in which they were in some danger. They came to our location and said, CNN, we want you to be able to feed your pictures that you took last night, and we want you to come to Iraqi TV. They escorted us there, and when we got there, we began to attempt to feed the pictures, but it turns out that Iraqi television has no video, audio pathway to the outside world. The sound you hear, by the way, is Mark Biello ripping huge strips of tape off to put on our windows. It's okay, Mark. Our viewers want to know what you're doing. Want to know you're trying to keep us safe here in Baghdad. But at any rate, the officials may not know that the pictures that they are trying to transmit are not getting out. Our executive producer, Robert Weiner, is on his way to Iraqi television right now. In retrospect, I'm sort of sorry he went there to get our feed engineer, Nick Robertson, who was at the TV station, but now they're both away from this hotel, which is bad in an attack. We hope they'll be back soon and safe, and as soon as they are, we'll let you know. But at any rate, we're continuing to monitor the situation here. It appears very quiet now. If Bernie Shaw's... Wait a minute, I hear something. Let's see. I thought it might have been the sound of an airplane. It's not. It's the sound of a very large, very old delivery truck.
One other thing before I run back down the hall, John. I have counted only two military trucks in the last hour of watching things here. Maybe you've seen more.
No, there's not much activity by the military at all, at least in this part of Baghdad. I imagine the troops, if there are troops available to go, might have gone to the areas where the bombs struck in the early morning hours just to see what the damage is and try to repair it if they could.
We know from what was said by the Pentagon that the wave after wave of attack bombers came in to do specific targeting. Command and control centers, anti-air
smoke that looked much thicker than fog.
Well, it was comparable in a way to the fog we've seen over the past couple days. It is dissipated now, but there is a thick mist hanging over downtown Baghdad now as traffic continues to go on this main 8-lane boulevard before our eyes down there. And as I say, we can see intact all of the important shrines, the monuments, the buildings that are so important to Baghdad. This is a city unlike Jordan, where there's so much stone and very few trees and very little greenery. Baghdad is very green. I would say it borders on being lush in many ways. You look downstairs at the swimming pool here where we are, and you can count, I sense more than 15 palm trees around the swimming pool. This is a green, lush city.
The difference is, I think, between the Amman or Jordan and Baghdad, the Tigris River, which is a huge flowing river, and in Jordan, the Jordan River is just a tiny little trickle in many places, so there is more water available to provide all this greenery, and the Iraqi people, the Iraqi government has spent millions of dollars to make it look as nice as it does, and it appears from everything we can see that in the downtown area, it's going to look as nice as it does the rest of the day, just like it did yesterday. Let's go back to our colleagues, maybe, and see if they have other questions for us here. We'll come back inside now.
CNN's Wolf Blitzer. Thank you, John. We will be coming back to you shortly, you and the rest of our CNN colleagues in Baghdad. CNN's Wolf Blitzer is standing by now live at the Pentagon. Wolf, CNN reports from Baghdad that a second attack is now underway. What do your sources there tell you?
Well, earlier at the news conference that Defense Secretary Dick Cheney held, he said that the U.S. would continue its strikes, even though there was a pause. He said that the U.S. would continue operations, left unclear exactly what he had in mind. But one point has to be underscored right now. If the U.S. and other allied aircraft are undertaking these kinds of strikes in daylight, in Baghdad and presumably elsewhere in the country as well, it certainly does signal that the United States and the Allies are very confident that they have this air superiority, that they can send in their F-15 Eagles, their F-16s, the other sophisticated aircraft, and go after specific targets that may not have been destroyed in the initial wave. They have some better reconnaissance, some real-time intelligence from all of the satellites that are overhead, from some of the other high-flying reconnaissance aircraft. So it does indicate that the U.S. has a high degree of confidence that the United States can send in these sophisticated aircraft, go after a specific target, and return, of course, to their bases without a whole lot of concern that Iraqi ground fire, anti-aircraft missile batteries, or artillery, or anything else could endanger those invading U.S. planes.
Wolf, one thing that our colleague Bernard Shaw mentioned was that he sensed that it might be perhaps a test that perhaps the U.S.-led coalition, the Allied forces, might want to see how much of the Iraqi resistance is still viable. Any word from your Pentagon sources on how much this second wave will be?
Well, one of the things that the United States and the other allies would want to test would be to see if the Iraqis still have any radar that they can turn on. And by sending in these aircraft, certainly if the Iraqis do have any radar, they would have to hone in with the radar signals and pinpoint exactly where those remaining radar installations may be located. So yes, I think Bernie is absolutely right. This may be a test. Then again, it may be part of a second wave of strikes against targets that were left intact during the initial bombing strike.
Thank you. CNN's Wolf Blitzer reporting to us live from the Pentagon. Patrick.
Well, there probably isn't anything that affects world markets more than war, and to find out how the war in the Gulf is affecting world markets, let's check in with CNN's Bill Hartley, who's live right now in New York. Bill?
Well, Patrick, markets around the world did indeed react swiftly to the war. Traders in London, New York, and Tokyo have been at their desks and on the phone, swapping stocks and commodities and money since the war began. The price of oil, driven higher by conflict at first, has fallen back to pre-invasion levels, as it appears Saddam Hussein is possibly no longer a threat to oil fields. Brent North Sea crude plunging to $25.25 a barrel. That is a drop of $3.75 from its Wednesday close in Houston. Pacific Rim stock markets buoyed as well. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index gaining 83 points. The Australian stock market all ordinaries up 33, and the Singapore Straits Times Index.
Find out whether or not the Iraqis still have radar capability. Can you tell us, is the bombing going on right now, or is there a pause now? Bernie, can you hear me?
Thanks very much. We're back here in Baghdad, and normalcy has returned. That brief wave has come and gone, and I see a school bus out on this 8-lane highway for the first time this morning. We are trying to assess as much as we can what is going on, and you can understand that is difficult to do. We are trying desperately, very desperately, to get out to Atlanta and subsequently to the world. The pictures we have shot during the night and during the first hours of daylight, and the people at the feed point at the television station, even Iraq's information minister Jasm is there trying to assist us in trying to get the word out. That is the situation right now. John Holland is back here now.
Bernie?
Well, Bernie, we've learned a little bit from a colleague who's been out on the streets of Baghdad. The garbage trucks are working today. They're picking up garbage. One of the points that I have tried to make for our viewers for the past several months is that the Iraqi society is very well organized. Everything needs to be orderly to please the Socialist Arab Ba'ath Party that President Saddam Hussein is the head of. And just another example of that, there are people out on the streets now. They're picking up the garbage, folks. They're trying to make it appear as business as usual, even though there's been another wave of bombing and anti-aircraft fire in the past 10 minutes.
To repeat, we do not know the whereabouts of President Saddam Hussein and his key advisors. We've not been told anything, and our executive producer here on the ground in Baghdad, Robert Weiner, is at the television station feed point, and knowing Robert, if he can get any kind of information when he comes back, he should be able to tell us a lot more than what we're able to report right now.
That's right. If we got a telephone line that works to another telephone in Baghdad that works, we'd be in better shape too. But we'll keep you posted as best we can until we get some more information from the outside. For Bernie Shaw, John Holloman live in Baghdad.
John and Bernie, we should point out to our viewers that it is now coming up on 10 a.m. mid-morning in Baghdad. Bernie, this for you. I don't know if you heard me when I introduced you. I was talking with CNN's Wolf Blitzer at the Pentagon, and he says, from his standpoint at the Pentagon, that you may be right, that this could be a test, that the U.S. and its allies, if the Iraqis still have any radar, and perhaps that is one reason why it has not been the onslaught that you endured last night.
I think that's right, and hearing from Wolf at the Pentagon really buttresses my feeling. I estimate that just a few bombs fell. We could feel the concussion where we are now, and I just envision it as an effort to see what's going on the ground. We passed through wave after wave during the night. Let's see what they still have that's active, that's viable, that's a potential threat to other plans we might have, other planes we might be sending in. And there was a response. The anti-aircraft batteries opened up. But again, these warplanes fly so fast, we could not see them during the night. I didn't see this wave that came in. Things happen so quickly in modern warfare that you don't see. What you do is hear and feel after the fact.
Thank you, CNN's Bernard Shaw, keeping us up to date with the very latest in Baghdad. Patrick.
Right now, we're going to go back to the Pentagon and CNN's Pentagon correspondent, Wolf Blitzer, who has the latest information. And I'm sure, Wolf, you just heard what Bernie had to say. What is the latest from there?
Patrick, the latest information from here is that the U.S. airstrikes after this initial pause are going to continue. They're going to continue for the time being after specific targets. The United States clearly has control of the skies. The fact that these U.S. aircraft are flying in daylight now in Baghdad and elsewhere in Iraq indicates that the U.S. Air Force has a high degree of confidence that most of the potential danger, most of the anti-aircraft missile batteries, most of the potential Iraqi Air Force jet fighters themselves that could threaten the U.S. fighter aircraft, the bombers, have been eliminated. And certainly the United States is going to go after the remaining targets. Anything that could knock out a U.S. plane is certainly going to be destroyed, or at least the U.S. Air Force is going to try to destroy those targets. And they're almost certainly testing the Iraqi capabilities, seeing if the Iraqis will turn on whatever radar they may have left to go after those radar sites.
Wolf, is there a feeling there, though, that this was almost, if you would, they're incredulous, that there would be no response from the Iraqi Air Force, or even much more than just some artillery from rooftops around the city of Baghdad, that there really has been no response at all from the Iraqi Air Forces?
Well, over these months, the U.S. Air Force, I must say, have been the prime advocates of air power. And for months, U.S. Air Force officials have maintained rather confidently that air power alone could get this job done. And I'm sure you'll recall, Patrick, that in September, the Chief of Staff of the U.S. Air Force, General Michael Dugan, was fired after saying publicly that the air war alone could basically get the job done decisively, rather speedily. And other officials at the Pentagon were always concerned, well, what happens if the air war doesn't succeed? There have been similar assurances in the past. Air power alone never got the job done. In this particular case, there is no indication, we are told by Pentagon officials, that the U.S. for the time being has any intention of bringing in the ground forces, sending in the mechanized infantry divisions of the Army, sending in the amphibious landing assault teams of the Marine Corps. For the time being, the President, the Defense Secretary, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Norman Schwarzkopf, are willing to let air power alone see what can be done, and that if there has to be a ground strike at some point, if the Iraqi forces have not yet capitulated, if they have not yet surrendered, at some point when the ground forces go in with the M1A1 battle tanks, the armored personnel carriers, all of the amphibious landing gear, at that point, presumably after such massive destruction, it will be a lot easier than if the ground forces were sent in right now.
Okay, Wolf Blitzer reporting live from the Pentagon. Thank you very much. Susan?
It is mid-morning in Amman, Jordan. CNN's Margaret Lowry is standing by on the phone with the latest there. Margaret.
Susan, a couple of things for you. First of all, Jordan's Royal Court tells us that airspace here is not closed. Repeat, not closed, despite reports to the contrary. And CNN's producer, Dan Fernand, is out at the border, that's Jordan's border with Iraq, and he reports to us that a town there called Traybil was hit by a bomb at some point during the night. Now, the town is in a border area between Iraq and Jordan in what is apparently considered to be a neutral zone, although the town technically may be Jordanian territory. And we've had no word yet from the Royal Court here on what that could mean or what the implications of that may be. Susan?
Margaret, can you expand on that a little bit? When you say that the court has said that the airspace is not closed, give us some details what that means.
Well, it means that we you that it is not closed. There were reports earlier in the night, I guess after the bombing started, that Jordanian airspace had closed. As you know, Jordan is between Iraq and Israel and is determined to remain neutral as long as it can. And there were fears that it had perhaps closed its airspace during the fighting, but the royal court tells us now that that is not true.
All right, the latest from CNN's Margaret Lowry in Amman, Jordan. Patrick.
As you well know, there's been some anti-war protesting on both sides of the Atlantic, and there is also some on the Pacific shores. And for the very latest on that, let's check in live with CNN's Ann McDermott, who is live right now at a protest in Los Angeles. Ann?
Well, you can probably hear a lot of noise behind me, a lot of shouting. There's drum beats, there was singing, and a little while ago you could barely hear yourself, hear anyone talk over the horns honking. People here who are against the war have been asking people to support them by sounding off, and they have. Next to me is a rare counter-protester, and the crowd is trying to hush him. But for the most part, these are people that are against the war. Earlier this morning, even before the hostilities broke out, nearly 160 people were arrested in Los Angeles. They were trying to block entrances to the federal building. This is also a federal building where we are on Wilshire Boulevard. People here tried to block intersections earlier today. The police stopped them. Police stopped them, but these people, some are still trying. Some here say they are going to continue their vigil through the night. The crowds have thinned a little bit, but there have been at least a couple of thousand people here. Up in San Francisco, there were also demonstrations. People paraded through the streets and settled down for an overnight candlelight vigil. Also, people demonstrated in Washington and in New York. They gathered outside the United Nations building. Again, the protest here is going on strong in Los Angeles. I'm Ann McDermott, CNN, reporting live in Los Angeles.
We take you now back to Baghdad. What is the latest there?
Susan, some interesting news. One of the big questions we have had during all of our coverage since the bombing began was, where is Saddam Hussein? CNN's satellite maven and chief engineer Nick Robertson has been at the Iraqi television headquarters, our feed point, for the past 2 hours, and he has seen Saddam Hussein. Nick, I know you were there to attempt to get these pictures that we took overnight out to the rest of the world. Tell us first of all about who you saw there, the names in the news in Iraq today.
Initially, I met Minister Jazem. After that, I went to sit at the feed point. We were unable to feed for lack of communications. While I was waiting at the feed point, President Saddam Hussein walked by on his way, I believe, to record a message either to American people or to the people of Iraq.
Yeah. Guess with me, Nick, how long ago it was when you saw President Saddam Hussein come into the TV station?
It would be within the last hour. It would probably approximately be 9 a.m. local time. That's 6 a.m. GMT when I saw him.
Yeah, and the Information Minister Jazem was there with him, I suppose, and were they talking together?
Jazem I saw separately at an earlier point, approximately 8:30 local time.
Okay, and the reason that our viewers can't see these pictures is because I guess the telephones don't work at Iraqi TV, or they can't get the pictures and sounds out to the satellite.
There's no attempt, to my knowledge, being made to feed at this point in time, and the reason for that being, I believe, a lack of communications to Amman, Jordan, as the next step in our feed process from here. I believe they're trying to make contact with Amman, Jordan. I was left very much in the dark with no information.
Yeah, well, of course, our viewers are in the dark as well, because I'm looking at what could be as much as 90 minutes of terrific videotape of last night's attack, which is here in my hands rather than on your TV sets at home, and we apologize for the problems we're having with Iraqi television getting this material to you. I'm sure they're trying to do what they can to get the pictures out, but you got to have telephones to make contact before you turn on a multi-100-watt satellite transmission to the outside world. Nick Robertson, we're very glad to have you back safe and sound, because as you know, anytime anybody leaves this hotel and goes to a sensitive location like the TV station, there's potential for trouble. So, to our colleagues in Atlanta, we're very glad to have Nick home safe and sound, and we'll be back to you with another updated report. But now we know at least that President Saddam Hussein, who we heard might be making a television address a couple of hours ago, has just arrived to record that address. So it might still be available to us, perhaps even live sometime in the next few hours, if Iraqi television can send it out. So we'll stay in touch. John Holloman, CNN Live in Baghdad.
John, just to reiterate, can you please clarify, Saddam Hussein was actually seen this morning, it is now 10 a.m. in Baghdad, in person?
That's right. Our man Nick Robertson just told you, Susan, he was at the television station 1 hour ago when Saddam Hussein walked in. Did the president acknowledge you were there, Nick? Did you wave at him? Did he wave back or anything?
The president did not see me. I kept myself very much inconspicuous.
Sometimes the best policy in these matters. But Susan, yes, our man, CNN's Nick Robertson, has seen the president of Iraq in the past 60 minutes at the TV station, so we know where he is.
Nick, what can you tell us about how Saddam Hussein looked? Did he look tired? Did he look tense? Did he look angry? Did he look frustrated? What can you tell us, perhaps speculate about the psychological strain on the man?
Very hard to say indeed. I would probably not describe him with any of the words that he used there. Maybe resolute, and maybe there was a determination in his step, and the people with him were walking at pace to keep up with him.
I'm sure the viewers all over the world are very, very interested in your sighting of President Saddam Hussein, because you may be the only Westerner who has seen him in the past 2 or 3 days. Nick, Susan, if you have more questions, we're here.
Thank you very much, John. Right now we are going back to Patrick Greenlaw, but thank you to you and all of our colleagues in CNN Baghdad. Patrick.
Obviously, a tremendous amount of developments in the past 8 hours since the initial invasion. CNN's Mark Leff has this report on the chronology of how things happened.
First word from 2 of the 4 countries whose planes were involved in the overnight attack on Iraq and Kuwait is that all aircraft and their crews have returned to their bases unharmed after destroying much of Iraq's Air Force, many of its elite Republican Guard troops, and, according to the U.S. Defense Department, much of Iraq's war-making capacity. The attack on military targets in Baghdad and throughout Iraq and Kuwait involved several waves of aircraft and dozens of cruise missiles.
I saw Tomahawk cruise missiles leave the U.S. destroyer Paul F. Foster at exactly 1:37 local time. That's 3 hours ahead of British time. They curled in an arc over the ship and then steadied and headed northwest for Iraq. And by 2 o'clock our time, 20 minutes later, 40 more cruise missiles had been launched.
Less than 3 hours after the sound of anti-aircraft fire first echoed over Baghdad, President Bush told a television audience the world could wait no longer.
We are determined to knock out Saddam Hussein's nuclear bomb potential. We will also destroy his chemical weapons facilities. Much of Saddam's artillery and tanks will be destroyed. Our operations are designed to best protect the lives of all the coalition forces by targeting Saddam's vast military arsenal.
The president later authorized the U.S. Department of Energy to make more than 1 million barrels of oil available for sale each day from the federal government's strategic petroleum reserves in Louisiana and Texas. The presidential speech also sent world oil spot market prices downward after the surge that followed first reports of the bombing. The Saudi government sounded air raid sirens after the first wave of aircraft hit Baghdad and ordered journalists to shelters. Both the Saudi and U.S. governments denied reports that Iraq had managed to launch a handful of Scud missiles toward Saudi targets. Elsewhere in the Middle East, Jordan has put its armed forces on alert after state-run Amman radio reported the attack on what it called sisterly Iraq. In Israel, which Iraq had promised would be a target of retaliation, the government ordered a state of alert, but said the Iraqi threat to Israel is diminishing. 5 hours after the airstrikes began, Baghdad radio broadcast a speech by President Saddam Hussein, in which he said the dawn of victory nears as what he called this great showdown begins. Mark Leff, CNN, reporting.
I'm Jonathan Mann.
I'm Patrick Embry. We continue with our coverage. Let's go now to Baghdad. CNN's John Holliman standing by. John?
Patrick, we've just received some news from Nick Robertson, CNN's chief satellite engineer here in Baghdad. He's been to the television station in an effort to get some videotape fed out to you. It can't be fed at the moment. Nick, you say you discovered some damage from last night's bombing, huh?
Yes, Yes, there was damage. There was some damage in the street, some broken glass and some small amounts of rubble, but there was one significant point of damage I noticed on a building I would best describe as a communications type of building with many dishes on the roof, microwave type dishes, maybe a post office communications type building. There was a sizable hole in one side of that, and one lower corner of the structure at the back had been sizably damaged.
And Nick also reports that about 60 minutes ago, he saw Iraqi President Saddam Hussein at the television station, apparently about to prepare a videotape message for the people of Iraq. At this point, we don't believe Iraqi television is on the air, but we're trying to determine that for sure. Yeah, and it appears that it's not on the air. That's the latest from Baghdad. We'll have more for you when we can get back to you.
John, about the fog, you still have it. Bring us up to date on conditions right now at a little after 10 in the morning.
Well, the fog's beginning to lift, Patrick, and in fact, I can go to the window and describe some things a little bit further away than I was able to before. Let's see. I see many more soldiers on the street than I've seen in the past. Revolving restaurant, Nick, tell me.
No, I see a revolving...
yes, I see a radar, a radar installation that appears that is an anti-aircraft installation here. That we've seen the anti-aircraft guns at this location in the past, but we've never seen a spinning radar outfit. So there is we've been talking with Wolf at the Pentagon and Charles Jaco in Saudi Arabia about spotting radars from the Iraqis. There appears to be one very close to our location here, which is now in operation. And as we look around the city, we can still see very little sign of any damage except what Nick reported, and also some broken glass, probably from the concussion of some of the bombs in several other locations around the city of Baghdad. As yet, we haven't been able to get our cameras out on the street. Iraqi officials won't let us take any pictures of the damage so far. We're hoping that as the day progresses, we'll be able to get you some new pictures and also to send you the pictures from last night, the dramatic footage of this air raid on Baghdad. Patrick?
We'll be checking back in with John Holloman as needed. Let's go to Jonathan Mann.
Patrick, we're going now to Charles Bierbauer at the White House. Charles?
Jonathan, attention has certainly shifted away from the White House in the course of the evening, and of course being the middle of the night here now. President Bush, we would imagine, is resting well. We do understand that Secretary of State Baker, Secretary of Defense Cheney are expected at the White House for breakfast, at least with the National Security Advisor, possibly with the President, too. There are no public events on the President's schedule for this now Thursday here. The last word, I guess it's Wednesday, I've lost track of time. The last word that we really got from the President is his words from the Oval Office.
Our objectives are clear. Saddam Hussein's forces will leave Kuwait. The legitimate government of Kuwait will be restored to its rightful place. And Kuwait will once again be free. Iraq will eventually comply with all relevant United Nations resolutions. And then, when peace is restored, it is our hope that Iraq will live as a peaceful and cooperative member of the family of nations, thus enhancing the security and stability of the Gulf. Some may ask, why act now? Why not wait? The answer is clear. The world could wait no longer. Sanctions, though having some effect, showed no signs of accomplishing their objective. Sanctions were tried for well over 5 months, and we and our allies concluded that sanctions alone would not force Saddam from Kuwait. While the world waited, Saddam Hussein systematically raped, pillaged, and plundered a tiny nation, no threat to his own. He subjected the people of Kuwait to unspeakable atrocities, and among those maimed and murdered, innocent children. While the world waited, Saddam sought to add to the chemical weapons arsenal he now possesses an infinitely more dangerous weapon of mass destruction, a nuclear weapon. And while the world waited, while the world talked peace and withdrawal, Saddam Hussein dug in and moved massive forces into Kuwait. While the world waited, while Saddam stalled, more damage was being done to the fragile economies of the Third World, the emerging democracies of Eastern Europe, to the entire world, including to our own economy. The United States, together with the United Nations, exhausted every means at our disposal to bring this crisis to a peaceful end. However, Saddam clearly felt that by stalling and threatening and defying the United Nations, he could weaken the forces arrayed against him.
There are no claims of victory, but the Bush administration is certainly satisfied with the way things are going in the early going. Others in Washington are not pleased. For several days, there's been a round-the-clock vigil and anti-war demonstration along Pennsylvania Avenue and in Lafayette Park across the street from the White House. Several hundred have gathered there. The crowd ebbs and flows in terms of its size. It has been mostly peaceful, but in the course of this evening, there were some clashes with police, some of them mounted on horseback. We understand that there were fists and bottles and arrests. President Bush has claimed throughout that he would have public support for his action, but it is not unanimous support. Jonathan?
Charles Bierbauer at the White House, thank you. Stick around, though. We'll be coming back to you in the hours ahead. Patrick?
John Sweeney is in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. Let's go to him now and get an update, get an idea of what the capital of Saudi Arabia is like at this hour in the morning. John?
Actually quite normal considering the circumstances. Saudi officials have scheduled a briefing in about 45 minutes. We expect to hear from a Saudi general on the situation, and that will be the first time officially we have heard from the Saudis. Again, about 45 minutes at this spot. We got some indication early on of today's raids. About 20 minutes before the raids were reported in Baghdad, we had eyewitnesses outside the main the main air base in the eastern province of Saudi Arabia, report seeing 9 F-15 American fighter planes taking off and heading north, accompanied by British fighter bombers and also by Kuwaiti aircraft. And on the nearby island nation of Bahrain, a British Air Wing commander says that British Jaguar aircraft will be involved in today's raids, following last night's raids by Britain's most powerful aircraft, the Tornado fighter bomber. That plane last night, the commander said, carried cluster bombs and also regular 1,000-pound bombs. We also have a report from Saudi oil industry officials who say that Iraqi artillery managed to destroy a couple of empty tanks in a refinery area in the neutral zone between Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. However, that artillery reportedly just missed a 30,000 barrel a day oil refinery. And we first, here in the Saudi capital, we first got wind that something was going on about 2 hours before the official attack began, when many of us were awakened by the tremendous sound of several KC-135 tanker refueler planes taking off one after the other here. We now know that these planes were sent on a mission to refuel the many combat aircraft that took part in the invasion. I'm John Sweeney, CNN, live in Riyadh.
John, we want to just check with you briefly. Charles Jaco has indicated, to the best of his determination from his vantage point, there have been no losses of aircraft. Can you add to that, confirm it?
The Military Information Bureau here has yet to make an official statement. They have issued some fax communique. We have no confirmation on that. As far as I know, there have been no planes lost.
All right, John Sweeney in the capital of Saudi Arabia, giving us a picture of how things are in the capital. Let's go now to Jonathan Mann. Jonathan?
Patrick, let's go to Francis Hardin at the State Department. Francis, is there any diplomatic communication going on right now between the U.S. or other members of the multinational force and the government of Iraq?
Jonathan, not right now, but there was plenty of activity earlier today. Secretary of State James Baker at the moment is not in the building. He is at home, presumably in bed, and he'll be up early again tomorrow morning, or that is to say later this morning. He is due at the White House at 7:30 to have breakfast with National Security Advisor Brent Scowcroft and also with Defense Secretary Dick Cheney. That is a meeting that could possibly also include the president. Wednesday morning, that is the day the attack began, Baker met with the Saudi ambassador to the United States, Prince Bandar. Bandar came here. He was asked for his country's green light for the battle to begin. After a quick call to Saudi Arabia, to King Fahd, that permission was granted. Baker spent much of the rest of the day calling the ambassadors of Israel, Kuwait, Germany, Syria, and Japan. He also called the chairman and ranking...
All right, we've got to interrupt Francis Hardin. We're going now to Baghdad for the latest. Go ahead, Baghdad.
Oh, Patrick, I wish I didn't have to tell you this, but there've just been two very loud explosions that rocked us a little bit here in downtown Baghdad. We're not sure precisely where they came from. I was about to start looking at some videotape of the initial attack last night, and I couldn't tell whether I was hearing the videotape or the live until my cameraman, Mark Biello, said, "Nope, this is not Memorex." And we look out now and look for signs of damage. I'm looking at the downtown Baghdad airport, a small airport. Don't see any sign of damage there. I hear some bells ringing someplace in the distance. I don't see any smoke anywhere as I look through the horizon. I'm looking at old downtown Baghdad. I see a huge water tank that's still intact. As I continue to look, I see two minarets of a mosque way off in the distance, perhaps 4 or 5 miles away. And I continue to see birds flying over the city. I can't tell you what just happened. I know it shook us up again as we have been accepting and feeling some incoming fire for some time here. At this point, Patrick, I can't tell you anything. I'm looking up in the sky to see if I see signs of jet planes flying over, and I just do not. I think since we can't tell you any more, we'll let you go back to what you were doing before, and we'll just keep our eyes and ears peeled here in Baghdad.
We can stay with you beyond the two explosions that you heard. Give us an idea of what the hotel is like. You're still on the 14th floor all night long. People who have been with us have heard about the bomb shelter below. What's going on in the home you're occupying now?
Well, in our CNN rooms, we have several rooms, Patrick, and we're here. Some people are trying to rest, to sleep, because none of us has had any sleep in days and days now, it seems like. The bomb shelters in the basement of the hotel were opened. When people went down there right after the initial attack in the middle of the night, they were locked in those shelters. They weren't allowed to leave, and that was too bad. The people got kind of cramped quarters down there, and several of us, Bernie Shaw, Peter Arnett, and I, were able to hide out from Iraqi authorities up here in our broadcast booth, so we were able to avoid being rounded up with everybody else, and that's how we were able to talk to you all night long. But in the hotel now, I can walk out into the hallway. There's still no electricity, still no water, still the telephone service inside the hotel is restored. I can talk to another room on another floor, but I still can't make a call outside. The operator at the hotel says all telephone lines down in Baghdad. It could be because of that report we received from our engineer Nick Robertson a few minutes ago that one of the major communication towers in downtown had been damaged by something in the attack overnight. So the hotel is still a nice place to live, probably compared to other places around Baghdad. It's one of the best places to live, but I'll tell you at this moment I would rather be with you in Atlanta, Georgia.
John, tell us about the last attack. Give us a little bit of a comparison to the one that you experienced in the middle of the night when all of this got going.
Well, what we just heard, Patrick, was just a couple of loud blasts. It could have been anti-aircraft fire, and in fact, I believe that's probably what it was, from an anti-aircraft gun on the east side of our location. And I'm looking out the window right now at another anti-aircraft battery on another side of our location, which has a radar tower spinning, a radar dish spinning around on top of it. It's the first time we've been here for a long time, and we've seen this particular installation in the past, but we've never seen the radar dish up and operating. So obviously, it's looking for incoming from someplace. Also, let me look out the window here with you for a moment. There's a small, not big enough for a 727, but a small private jet airport in downtown Baghdad. I see planes on the ground there. I don't see much activity of planes taxiing or anything like that, but it appears to be undamaged at this hour. And off in the distance, I hear a rumbling right now. I don't know if you can hear this rumbling, but it's coming from where I stand. I believe it is coming from the west. It sounds almost like at the beginning of a cowboy movie when you hear of a herd of horses thundering off in the distance. That's the sort of sound I can hear right now out the window, and I believe the direction it's coming from is the west. brightly lighted with anti-aircraft fire from the Iraqis, which, from what we could tell, did not have a lot of effect. I'm hearing now the sounds of what I believe are big bombs falling. I don't see anything from these bombs, but I can just hear it. It's a rumbling. Patrick, you'll remember I covered the earthquake in San Francisco for us back a couple of Octobers ago, and it's that sort of feeling that I'm getting here. I'm going to let you stick the microphone out the window, see if you can hear what I hear. It sounds like distant thunder. I'm thankful to be able to tell you that this attack that is occurring right now in Baghdad is much further away from the central city than what we heard last night. And I'm going to continue to peer out the window through the white clouds with some breaks so that you can see blue, just to see if I can see some sort of sign of some kind of aircraft. And I do not. I'll just tell you that. And just as quickly as the rumbling started, it seems to have stopped here in Baghdad. Patrick, it just ended just this instant.
John, do we know any more? Have you been able to make any kind of investigation of the building that you had described earlier with the white smoke pouring out of it? Any speculation or any firm ideas on what that was?
Well, we thought perhaps it might be a smoke generator of some kind. We didn't know. One Iraqi official said he thought it might be some trash burning rather than anything intentional to fill up the air. But the volume of the white smoke that was coming out of this whatever it was at the side of this building was something far beyond a pile of trash. And the smoke was all pure white. It looked just like fog, only it had an awful stench to it. And so we don't know. I've never seen anything like it. We might get our people at the Pentagon or in Saudi Arabia who knows some things about instruments of war to say, to tell us if there's anything like that in the U.S. arsenal, something to put a lot of fog-looking smoke over a wide area. Let me describe the streets of Baghdad for you for a minute. There still is traffic. There are a lot more soldiers on the street around the hotel than there have been in the past, and it still seems that people are trying to go about their business here despite all this thunder, which is obviously not coming from heaven, but coming from the coalition partners who are continuing to keep Baghdad under attack.
John, I guess we're coming up on, roughly 8 hours now since the first attack. 10:30. It's coming up on 10:30 a.m. right now in Baghdad. But around 8 hours ago, the first strike hit the city, and following it at that time, you and Bernie and Peter Arnett had a couple of encounters with security people in the hotel. I'm wondering if you can, and if you've had any other encounters that I may have missed, can you describe any of these people, the attitude that they have about what is happening to their country?
I asked one fellow about the comparison between this and the Iran-Iraq war, which he had obviously lived through. He was a man probably 25 or 30 years old. He was the man who took many of our videotapes. And I asked him the question, and he said, this is much different from the Iran-Iraq war. And I've been talking to the Iraqi people for some time about comparisons and things. And they always said they didn't expect the U.S. to be able to do any more to them than was done in the Iran-Iraq war. And as it turns out, this fellow indicated very strongly to me that this certainly was worse than the Iran-Iraq war. I'm looking out on the east side of our hotel. Our producer, Robert Weiner, says there's rinse and damage here. I can't get my microphone cable to you, Robert. You'll have to come to me and describe for me what you see out this room of the hotel, out the east side. Just tell me what you see.
Out beyond the foreign ministry, there has been an attack. There are thick, billowing clouds of black smoke. The anti-aircraft guns, the batteries that are in front of us on one of the buildings have been at alert. They have fired off several rounds. I don't think you could hear those, John, when you were on the other side. But people are bracing for another attack here.
Yeah, okay, Robert. So we've got black smoke pouring out of one building. Patrick, as soon as you and I get a break from this conversation, I'm going to get a somewhat longer microphone cord so I can travel more distance through this place and give you better outlooks from all sides of the hotel where we're staying. I'll look back out my west-facing window again to tell you, after a few unnerving moments in the past few minutes, things seem to be pretty calm again, except for this thick, black, billowing smoke that we see on the other side of the place.
John Holloman, take a breather. Stay safe. We'll be back to you, obviously, in the very near future. Jonathan?
Patrick, as the multinational attack on Iraq continues, let's go now to the country, to the city that Iraq has targeted for its own eventual attack, if one comes, and that is Israel and Tel Aviv, where CNN's Richard Roth is standing by. Richard?
Yes, Jonathan, Israel is breathing a little easier this morning, but officials are saying don't break out the wine yet. Iraqi missile batteries that may have been pointed at Israel, and specifically Tel Aviv, may have been destroyed, but authorities are calling on everyone to obey civil defense emergency procedures. Basically, the operational line right now in Israel is, we're prepared for anything. But certainly Tel Aviv residents are very pleased to see the sun come up here. Saddam Hussein vowed to make Tel Aviv his first target should he get hit in Iraq by U.S.-led forces. But Israel is not involved in this conflict so far. CNN's Richard Blystone in Jerusalem has more on the reaction here in the Jewish state to the U.S.-led raid on Baghdad.
Most of Israel slept through it, as Saddam Hussein's threat to attack the Jewish state with missiles was violently contradicted. The lights of prime target Tel Aviv stayed on. An Iraqi ballistic missile wouldn't need them to find or lose its way. Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir, who promised the U.S. not to make a preemptive strike at the missiles, had been informed an hour before Operation Desert Shield became Desert Storm. Essential personnel lugged their gas masks as they reported into the General Staff headquarters at Kinya Base in Tel Aviv. Go home, the radio told others. Stay home. Open the box. Get the mask ready. Israeli television came on the air to show everyone, once again, how to do it. Traffic all but disappeared from the streets of Jerusalem, but the sirens never sounded. In the Foreign Ministry's Situation Room in Jerusalem, the crisis team glued to the television as an attack became more and more unlikely. Deputy Foreign Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, pleased but cautious.
As you know, Israel is not involved in this conflict, but we follow the events very closely. We wish the American and coalition forces Godspeed and full success in achieving their missions, and we hope that they'll come home safely, all of them, and quickly.
In downtown Tel Aviv, nonchalant.
Nobody is worried about this, and we are very happy that they make that come in this situation to finish him quickly and shortly.
And a little early rejoicing. Defense Minister Moshe Aarons went on TV to say, don't rejoice too soon.
It's too early to say the danger to Israel has passed. We must continue to be alert and ready.
But, he said, it's a very good morning for Israel. A missile barrage from western Iraq, more than 300 miles away, had been considered a long shot in more ways than one. Israeli analysts thought at most a handful would get off the ground, and those with small payloads. And so inaccurate, it was said, that Jerusalem might be in no more danger than Amman, Jordan, 70 miles away. If that was an exaggeration, it never got put to the test. Jerusalem residents ventured, few and cautious, into the streets after daybreak, their gas masks still close at hand.
I just woke up and I turned on the radio and the TV. I heard. I make a coffee for everybody. We sit, we're laughing, and that's it.
Police patrolled warily in Arab East Jerusalem, part of it under curfew, along with the occupied West Bank. Palestinians were still backing Saddam Hussein.
You know, we have to be with him. We don't have another choice.
In defeat, a kind of victory for Iraq's president that'll take more than bombs to blow away. The scores against Iraq's missiles are a relief politically as well as militarily. Israel had agreed to let the U.S. deal with them initially, but warned...
All right, we'll get back to Richard Blystone. Back to Baghdad, bombing taking place. Go ahead, John Holloman.
Patrick, I apologize for interrupting my colleague Dick Blystone in Jerusalem. We're hearing the same sound that we were hearing a few minutes ago, this rolling thunder of what we assume is incoming bombs coming from a direction which may well be to the west of our location in the middle of downtown Baghdad. And
looking around for the source of it. We don't hear it right now, but while I was away, I was able to get a longer microphone cord so I can go over and perhaps a little better describe for you this smoke from some building which has obviously been hit in one of the most recent attacks. Out the window on the east side of our hotel, one of the hotel's power generators has been fired up. We can see that, so it may be that we're going to get some electricity from here. As I look out the window, I see thick plumes of black or grayish smoke coming from a building which may be as much as a mile away. My colleague Mark Biello is looking at this through a very good set of binoculars. Mark, can you see anything as far as the source of that smoke?
No, most of the smoke is hidden by a building in the front. There's some communication towers in front of it. My guess would be some kind of oil processing or oil refinery in the outskirts of Baghdad.
Yeah, we know that Baghdad has plenty of those, plenty of oil refineries. I'm going to stick my head out another window because you may be able to hear some of the sound. It's more sound coming from generally the same area where the smoke is coming from, which I guess is north from our location in the central city. And as Mark points out, it may well be an oil refinery because there is so much thick black smoke mixed in with some white smoke. So there might be something that combines oil and water, which gives you smoke it's this color. The smoke is coming out in such volume now that it's creating a pall over a big section of the sky. As I look out on downtown Baghdad from a different vantage point than you and I have had in the past, Patrick, I can tell you about some things that I wasn't able to tell you about before. The entire downtown section still seems totally unaffected by this. The buildings, the shrines, the Muslim holy places have not been touched at all by the incoming United States. And I see, I'm going to tell you about something that may get me in trouble with the Iraqi government, but I'll tell you anyway. I'm looking out at an anti-aircraft installation on a building near my location. I won't give you the direction on the compass because I'm sure that would get me in trouble. But the people at this installation are moving their gun barrels back and forth. They are searching the skies right now, attempting to find whatever aircraft are responsible for this thick black smoke that we're talking about, which may well be from a chemical plant or an oil refinery or some sort of industrial facility, because that black smoke continues to pour out even in daylight here in Baghdad. I can see from this location, I believe, the Tigris River, and I see nothing really unusual there on the river banks as we look out the window. It appears that the river has not been involved very much in what's happening here. And so the situation in Baghdad, which has been certainly remarkably testy for the past, I guess, nearly 12 hours now, is getting even more testy minute by minute as we continue to be hit with some sort of bombs and anti-aircraft fire at those bombs. Patrick?
John, we can talk more about the bombing that's going on, but if we've got a moment here, I wonder if you might just tell our viewers, we're thrilled here that all of you CNN folks have made it through the night. I wonder if you could tell us and try to give us a feeling of what it must be like to be in that hotel. I know, for one, I would be wondering when the 2,000-pound bomb would hit the roof. How did you feel through all of that?
If you're talking personal emotions, Patrick, I think that is what you're talking. We've all had to face up to this. We had a meeting of our staff last night to decide if we would all stay here or some of us would leave and go back. And our plan was to get on a charter plane, some of us today, and go back perhaps to Amman, Jordan. As it turns out, there probably won't be any charter flights today. We are here because our good night's sleep was interrupted by this first American Allied attack here on Baghdad. But the emotions, I mean, you look on the brightest side you can. We've considered every possible option that we can think of as a better place to be than this hotel. This hotel is the newest, thickest, best-built, most modern hotel, certainly in Baghdad. The problem with it is that it's in the center of the city, and if the coalition decided it was going to do a great deal of damage to the shrines in downtown Baghdad, to the big government buildings here, to the ministries, our hotel would be directly in the flight path. And in fact, last night, as this attack was going on, we could hear the fighter jets coming right over our hotel as they were on their way, and we were very pleased that they went somewhere else before they loosed the bombs and the bullets
carried. But it's an emotional roller coaster. It's an up and down situation. Frederick, I know you want to talk more about feelings and things I'm seeing right now, but I must tell you, I see on the west side of Baghdad more smoke coming up from a building near one of the main water tanks for the city. The smoke is just about over now, but there was a huge puff of it a few moments ago, and now the smoke is beginning to dissipate. And out the window, I hear the pummeling of more bombs as we talk. But I'm surprised. I'll tell you a personal story, Patrick. I had no idea. I've never been in a war. Peter Arnett, my colleague, has spent much of his life in the Vietnam War, and he's used to covering things like this. And I didn't know how I would react. I guess I was, the options here last night when the bombing started were to stay here and try to cover the story, or to get into the hotel's fallout shelter, or the bomb shelter. We decided to stay here and do the best job we could of staying in touch. We felt it was a miracle that the microphone that I'm using to talk to you and the communication circuit it's hooked up to was allowed to stay, in operation through this whole night. The fact that it's still working, we still consider a miracle, and we'll continue to use it for all it's worth for as long as we can until the communication link gets cut. We have a couple backups that we might also try to use if this goes down, but this is obviously the most convenient way for us to talk. And as long as I can talk to you and hear from you and hear from our other correspondents about what's going on, I have personally a much greater sense of personal security than I might if I didn't have access to this. Before I throw it back to you, Patrick, I've got to go to the window here and look out and just see if I can see some signs of the airplanes that are responsible for all the noise that I hear here. And I don't. I see birds in the sky. I hear these loud reports. I would describe them as being like the sounds from a battleship, the 26-inch guns on a battleship like the New Jersey. Well, there was anti-aircraft guns. You probably heard that. A little crack and pop, and I believe the anti-aircraft fire is much of what we're hearing right now. As I look out toward the south, or rather toward the north, I see the little downtown airstrip. It still seems to be okay. I don't see any signs really of much additional new smoke on the horizon. But eerie, it really is. That's going to be the word to describe this part of the war in the Gulf as far as being in Baghdad. You put your head out the window and you get this eerie feeling from everything around you, Patrick.
And do you also get a feeling of history, John? I don't want to sound melodramatic, but it can't escape coming to mind Edward R. Murrow somewhere in London telling the folks back home, this is London. Do you get that at all?
Sure, absolutely. It's not overpowering, but you do get a sense that in the past 25 years there hasn't been a battle like the battle that we were able to witness last night. And we know that last night there were 45 journalists, period, from the world in Baghdad, and CNN had 8 of them. And it makes us very proud of the company we work for and the people we serve, the folks who are watching this broadcast right now. So yeah, we do have a sense of the history of what we're covering, certainly.
Tell me, John, also, you maybe go back over for some of our viewers, because of the word that you continue to use, eerie. You've seen taxi cabs driving in reverse. You've seen a few people walking around, and you've seen anti-aircraft installations being altered slightly in position.
Yeah, there are a lot of things like that, Patrick. I mean, everything in Baghdad doesn't fit the American mindset, I guess. The people here seem to disregard the prospect of death in a fiery war. The people seem, and I've interviewed hundreds of them in the couple of months I've been here, they seem to really believe it's okay to die in a war if your side is right, and they believe their side is right. They believe President Saddam Hussein is a great leader, and if he tells them to go and die for Kuwait, they're going to go and die for Kuwait. I talked to a mother with a baby at a bus station a couple of days ago. Baby's a beautiful little child, 9 months old, and His name is Hyder, and I said, ma'am, if Hyder were killed in this war with the United States, would it be worth it just for Kuwait? And she said, well, I'd hate to sacrifice my baby, but Kuwait is very important. I mean, they really believe that here, I think. I don't think they could be faking it, this many people over this many months. I think, it's in the mindset, and that's part of the strangeness. It's not like, if you and I were in a situation where there were bombs coming, I don't know what it would take for us to be willing to defend, and lay down our lives for something inanimate like a piece of ground with some oil in it, It's not the way you and I react to things, and that's part of the eeriness. As I look out the window now, I hear one report, loud report, noise like a bomb after another. It's unnerving to me, and I'm seeing three women in traditional Muslim dress, like you see the women in Saudi Arabia wearing. They're walking down the street kind of nonchalantly, and their cars still going by as this happens. There's a soccer field across from our hotel. I don't see anybody playing soccer. I'm kind of pleased that at least the young children who would play outside on a normal day are not playing outside on a day like this, because anything could happen, of course. So that's part of the eeriness, and you can come up with 100 examples. This is not like life where we live.
Well, John, you mentioned the feeling that the people have in Iraq, their determination and feeling that Kuwait is their 19th province, and you expressed the sentiment that we may not feel or have an understanding for it. The British division of that part of the world, would that be something like the British saying Florida is no longer yours some 40 years ago?
Yeah, I guess so, Patrick. Information Minister Latif Jassim, a man I've come to know, I think, pretty well over the past 2 months that I've been here, has a line when you say, why won't you give up Kuwait to avoid war? He says, well, why don't you give up California? And that's the way they look at it. I mean, they think that Kuwait is the same kind of part of their country as Florida or California is to the United States. So it's the kind of situation that they're committed to. I mean, there is some history that supports their point of view, and there's some other history that supports the point of view that the Kuwaiti, the Al-Sabia family in Kuwait has, that, Kuwait is theirs, and they've run it well, and the people are happy there, and all of that. So, it's just a different point of view, and it's not like the point of view that you and I would have given perhaps identical circumstances.
John Holloman, hang on to the microphone. Stand by with us. We're going to Richard Roth now in Tel Aviv. Richard?
Yes, thank you. With me right now is the former Prime Minister, former Defense Minister of Israel, now a leading Labor Party official here, Yitzhak Rabin. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
A quick assessment of this U.S. raid on Iraq.
Well, first, allow me to express, I believe, the feeling of the people of Israel of respect and admiration for the courageous and daring decision by President Bush to use force, and no doubt, great admiration for your people of the armed forces for the achievement they got in the first strike. I believe that the first strike was very successful, almost unbelievable. But you have to bear in mind, you don't win a war by the first strike unless there will be a continuation of your air activities to establish air supremacy. It will be very difficult to approach the next phase, the uprooting of the Iraqi forces from Kuwait.
Saddam Hussein was seen entering the television